Hello, how we doing? It's me, Salty. I'm here for a sneaky Monday stream by request from one of our lovely moderators, Askar, who is not here. I made a couple of sneaky changes to the stream. You might notice. Also, hello viewers, hello VOD watchers. Yes. I made a couple of very sneaky little adjustments to the stream. The border is now a little bit fuzzy. I don't know whether that's good or bad. I could change it back, who knows. And I've also got a little... I tried to make it look like a book, which is what I'm currently reading. And also, I've got a little PNG tuber down the bottom there. Little shark friendo. I will work on them a little bit so that the animation's a bit better, because even though you can only use 2 images for it, you can use animations. So I was thinking of having like an idle animation and a talking animation so that it doesn't just look like 2 images. So, I guess Askar will just have to catch the VOD and catch me tomorrow night. So let's get comfy and let's start reading. Now then, we are about nearly halfway through the book, and this book moves rather quickly. It's not like Shogun, for example. The story is quite compact and it moves quite quickly. So, Takeo, who is Shigeru's adoptee, has been officially sworn in to the Otori clan at the cost of Shigeru having to marry Lady Kaede Shirakawa. Unfortunately, Lord Shigeru has been secretly promised to Lady Maruyama, and Lady Maruyama has met Kaede, and she's rather pissed off, secretly pissed off. Even though it's not Kaede's fault. She's basically being sold off, I guess, by her family for political points. Oh yes, and also Takeo is discovering his ninja heritage, basically. I don't want to say ninja, because the word ninja is never used in this. I don't think this book uses the word ninja. They're called the tribe, who are supposed to be descendants of basically the original human beings, had access to mystical powers. Just little things that, like tricks of the mind and being able to appear to be in 2 places at once, sort of thing. Just basically ninja type stuff. So it's not anything too overt. So it's a little sprinkle of magic, because ninjas are supposed to be like supernatural almost, even though they're not. And I think it kind of goes to the kind of spirituality of the book too. It's kind of a mix. Alright, so we're up to chapter 6. And yes, so Shigeru's uncles have just forced him to sign the marriage contract, and Takeo is part of the clan. So now we move to Keide, and we find out what she's up to. She's travelling with Lady Maruyama. Chapter 6. Keide left Noguchi Castle with no regrets and few hopes for the future. But since she had hardly been beyond its walls in 8 years, she had been a hostage with the Noguchi, and since she was only 15, she could not help but be entranced by everything she saw. For the first few miles, she and Lady Maruyama were carried in palanquins by teams of porters, but the swaying motion made her feel sick, and at the first rest stop, she insisted on getting out and walking with Shizuka. It was high summer. The sun was strong. Shizuka tied a shady hat on her head and also held up a parasol over her. Lady Shirakawa must not appear before her husband as brown as I am, she giggled. They travelled until midday, rested for a while at an inn, and then went on for another few miles before evening. By the time they stopped, Keide's mind was reeling with all she had seen. The brilliant green of the rice fields, as smooth and luxuriant as the pelt of an animal. The white splashing rivers that raced beside the road. The mountains that rose before them, range after range, clad in their rich summer green, interwoven with the crimson of wild azaleas. And the people on the road of every sort and description. Warriors in armour, bearing swords and riding spirited horses. Farmers carrying all manner of things that she'd never seen before. Ox carts and pack horses, beggars and peddlers. She was not supposed to stare at them, and they were supposed to bow to the ground as the procession went past. But she sneaked as many looks at them as they did at her. They were accompanied by Lady Maruyama's retainers. The chief among them, a man named Sugita, treated the lady with the easy familiarity of an uncle. Keide found that she liked him. Okay, I don't know how old he is. I liked to walk when I was your age. Oh, that's Lady Maruyama, damn it. I liked to walk when I was your age, Lady Maruyama said as they ate the evening meal together. I still prefer it, to be truthful, but I also fear the sun. She gazed at Keide's unlined skin. She had been kind to her all day, but Keide could not forget her first impression, that the older woman did not like her, and that, in some way, she had offended her. You do not ride? She asked. She had been envying the men on their horses. They seemed so powerful and free. Sometimes I ride, Lady Maruyama replied. But when I am a poor defenceless woman travelling through Tohan land, I allow myself to be carried in the palanquin. Keide looked questioningly at her. Yet Lady Maruyama is said to be powerful, she murmured. Hello, Kitty. Oh, you think it's clever? Oh, good. That's not actually the book. That's just a book with the text that I've put across it. But thank you all. That's the actual book. I probably should just take a picture and put that on and stop being so lazy. Well, thank you all. Do you like my little shark as well, who moves when I talk? Right. Yet Lady Maruyama is said to be powerful, she murmured. I must hide my power among men, she replied, or they will not hesitate to crush me. I have not been on a horse since I was a child, Kade admitted. But all warriors' daughters should be taught to ride, Lady Maruyama exclaimed. Did the Noguchi not do so? You like the envy heart? Thank you, Kitty. I hope you're well today. They taught me nothing, Kade said with bitterness. No use of the sword or knife? No archery? I did not know women learned such things. In the West they do. There was a short silence. Kade, hungry for once, took a little more rice. Did the Noguchi treat you well? The lady asked. In the beginning, no, not at all. Kade felt herself torn between her usual guarded response to anyone who questioned her and a strong desire to confide in this woman who was of the same class as she was and who was her equal. They were alone in the room, apart from Shizuka and Lady Maruyama's woman, Sachi, who both sat so still Kade was hardly aware of them. After the incident with the guard, I was moved to the residence. Before that, I lived with the servant girls in the castle. How shameful, Lady Maruyama said, her own voice bitter now. How do the Noguchi dare? When you are Shirakawa. She looked down and said, I fear for my own daughter, who is held hostage by Lord Aida. It was not so bad when I was a child, Kade said. The servants pitied me. But when the springtime began, and I was neither child nor woman, no one protected me. Until a man had to die. To her own astonishment, her voice faltered. A sudden rush of emotion made her eyes fill with tears. The memory came flooding back to her. The man's hands, the hard bulge of his sex against her, the knife in her hand, the blood, his death before her eyes. Forgive me, she whispered. Lady Maruyama reached across the space between them and took her hand. Poor child, she said, stroking Kade's fingers. All the poor children, all the poor daughters. If only I could if only I could free you all. Kade wanted nothing more than to sob her heart out. She struggled to regain control. After that, they moved me to the residence. I was given my own maid, first Junko, then Shizuka. Life was much better there. I was to be married to an old man. He died, and I was glad. But then people began to say that to know me, to desire me, brings death. She heard the other woman's sharp intake of breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I do not want to cause any man's death," Kaede said in a low voice. "I fear marriage. I do not want Lord Otori to die because of me." When Lady Maruyama replied, her voice was thin. "You must not say such things, or even think them." Kaede looked at her. Her face, white in the lamplight, seemed filled with a sudden apprehension. "I'm very tired," the lady went on. "Forgive me if I do not talk more tonight. We have many days on the road together after all." She called to Sachi. The food trays were removed and the beds spread out. Shizuka accompanied Kaede to the privy and washed her hands when she had finished there. "What did I say to offend her?" Kaede whispered. "I don't understand her. One moment she is friendly, the next she stares at me as if I were poison to her." "You're imagining things," Shizuka said lightly. "Lady Maruyama is very fond of you. Apart from anything else, after her daughter, you are her closest female relative." "Am I?" Kaede replied, and when Shizuka nodded, emphatically asked, "Is that so important? If anything happened to them, it is you who would inherit Maruyama. No one's told you this because the Tohan still hope to acquire the domain. It's one of the reasons why Aida insisted you should go to the Noguchi as a hostage." When Kaede said nothing, Shizuka went on. "My lady is even more important than she thought she was. Don't tease me. I feel lost in this world. I feel as if I know nothing." Kaede went to bed, her mind swirling. She was aware of Lady Maruyama's restlessness through the night as well, and the next morning the lady's beautiful face looked tired and drawn. But she spoke to Kaede kindly and, when they set out, arranged for a gentle brown horse to be provided for her. Thank you for following, friendo. Follows are anonymous on this stream. Sugita lifted her onto its back, and at first one of the men walked at its head, leading it. She remembered the ponies she had ridden as a child, and the ability began to come back. Shizuka would not let her ride for the whole day, saying her muscles would ache too much, and she would be too tired, but she loved the feeling of being on the horse's back, and could not wait to mount again. The rhythm of its gait calmed her a little, and helped her to organize her thoughts. Mostly, she was appalled at her lack of education and her ignorance of the world she was entering. She was a pawn on the board of the great game the warlords were playing, but she longed to be more than that, to understand the moves of the game, and to play it herself. Two things happened to disturb her further. One afternoon, they had paused for a rest at an unusual time, at a crossroads, when they were joined by a small group of horsemen riding from the southwest, almost as if by some prearranged appointment. Shizuka ran to greet them in her usual way, eager to know where they were from and what gossip they might bring. Kaede, watching idly, saw her speak to one of the men. He leaned low from the saddle to tell her something. She nodded with a deep seriousness and then gave the horse a slap on its flank. It jumped forward. There was a shout of laughter from the men, followed by Shizuka's high-pitched giggle. But in that moment, Kaede felt she saw something new in the girl who had become her servant, an intensity that puzzled her. Okay. For the rest of the day, Shizuka was her usual self, exclaiming over the beauties of the countryside, picking bunches of wildflowers, exchanging greetings with everyone she met. But at the lodging place that night, Kaede came into the room to find Shizuka talking earnestly to Lady Maruyama, not like a servant, but sitting knee to knee with her as an equal. Their talk immediately turned to the weather and the next day's arrangements, but Kaede felt a sense of betrayal. Shizuka had said to her, "People like me don't really meet people like her," but there was obviously some relationship between them that she had known nothing about. It made her suspicious and a little jealous. She had come to depend on Shizuka and did not want to share her with others. The heat grew more intense and travel more uncomfortable. One day the earth shook several times, adding to Kaede's unease. She slept badly, troubled as much by suspicions as by fleas and other night insects. She longed for the journey to end, and yet she dreaded arriving. Every day she decided she would question Shizuka, but every night something held her back. Lady Maruyama continued to treat her with kindness, but Kaede did not trust her, and she responded cautiously and with reserve. Then she felt ungracious and childish. Her appetite disappeared again. Shizuka scolded her at night in the bath. "Oh, your bones stick out, lady. You must eat. What will your husband think?" "Don't start talking about my husband," Kaede said hurriedly. "I don't care what he thinks. Maybe he will hate the sight of me and leave me alone." And then she was ashamed again for her childishness of the words. They came at last to the mountain town of Suwano, riding through the narrow pass at the end of the day, the ranges already black against the setting sun. The breeze moved through the terraced rice fields, like a wave through water. Lotus plants raised their huge jade-green leaves, and around the fields wildflowers blossomed in a riot of colour. The last rays of the sun turned the white walls of the town to pink and gold. "This looks like a happy place," Kaede could not help exclaiming. Lady Maruyama, riding just ahead of her, turned in the saddle. "We are no longer in Tohan country. This is the beginning of the Otori fief," she said. "Here we will wait for Lord Shigeru." The next morning, Shizuka brought strange clothes instead of Kaede's usual robes. "You are to start learning the sword, lady," she announced, showing Kaede how to put them on. She looked at her with approval. "Apart from the hair, Lady Kaede could pass for a boy," she said, lifting the heavy weight of her hair away from Kaede's face and tying it back with leather cords. Kaede ran her hands over her own body. The clothes were of rough, dark-dyed hemp, and fitted her loosely. They were like nothing she had ever worn. They hid her shape and made her feel free. "Who says I am to learn?" "Lady Mariama. We will be here several days, maybe a week before the Autori arrive. She wants you to be occupied and not fretting." "She is very kind," Kaede replied. "Who will teach me?" Shizuka giggled and did not answer. She took Kaede across the street from their lodgings to a long, low building with a wooden floor. Here they removed their sandals and put on split-toed boots. Shizuka handed Kaede a mask to protect her face and took down 2 long wooden poles from a rack on the wall. "Did the lady ever learn to fight with these?" "As a child, of course," Kaede replied, "almost as soon as I could walk." "Then you will remember this." Shizuka handed one pole to Kaede and, holding the other firmly in both hands, executed a fluid series of movements, the pole flashing through the air faster than the eye could follow. "Not like that," Kaede admitted, astonished. She would have thought Shizuka hardly able to lift the pole, let alone wield it with such power and skill. Shizuka giggled again, changing under Kaede's eyes from concentrated warrior to scatterbrained servant. "Lady Kaede will find it all comes back. Let's begin." Kaede felt cold despite the warmth of the summer morning. "You are the teacher." "Oh, I only know a little, lady. You probably know just as much. I don't suppose there's anything I can teach you." But even though Kaede found that she did remember the movements and had a certain natural ability and the advantage of height, Shizuka's skill far surpassed anything she could do. At the end of the morning, she was exhausted, dripping with sweat and seething with emotion. Shizuka, who as a servant did everything in her power to please Kaede, was completely ruthless as a teacher. Every stroke had to be perfectly executed. Time after time, when Kaede thought she was finally finding the rhythm, Shizuka would stop her and politely point out that her balance was on the wrong foot, or that she had left herself open to sudden death had they been fighting with the sword. Finally, she signalled that they should finish, placed the poles back in the rack, took off the face masks, and wiped Kaede's face with a towel. "It was good," she said. "Lady Kaede has great skill. We will soon make up for the years that were lost." The physical activity, the shock of discovering Shizuka's skill, the warmth of the morning, the unfamiliar clothes, all combined to break down Kaede's self-control. She seized the towel and buried her face in it as sobs racked her. "Lady," Shizuka whispered, "Lady, don't cry. You have nothing to fear." "Who are you really?" Kaede cried. "Why are you pretending to be what you are not? You told me you did not know Lady Mariama." "I wish I could tell you everything, but I cannot yet. But my role here is to protect you. Arai sent me for that purpose." "You know Arai too? All you said before was that you were from his town." "Yes, but We are closer than that. He has the deepest regard for you, feeling himself to be in your debt. When Lord Noguchi exiled him, his anger was extreme. He felt himself insulted by Noguchi's distrust, as well as his treatment of you. When he heard you were to be sent to Inuyama to be married, he made arrangements for me to accompany you. Why? Will I be in danger there? Inuyama is a dangerous place, even more so now when the three countries are on the brink of war. Once the Otori alliance is settled by your marriage, Aida will fight the Seishu in the west. In the bare room, sunlight slanted through the dust raised by their feet. From beyond the lattice windows, Kaede could hear the flow of water in the canals, the cries of street sellers, the laughter of children. That world seemed so simple and open, with none of the dark secrets that lay beneath her own. I am just a pawn on the board, she said bitterly. You will sacrifice me as swiftly as the Tohan would. No, Arai and I are your servants, lady. He has sworn to protect you, and I obey him. She smiled, her face suddenly vivid with passion. They are lovers, Kaede thought, and felt again a pang of jealousy that she had wanted, that she had to share. And felt a pang of jealousy that she had to share Shizuka with anyone else. She wanted to ask, what about Lady Maruyama? What is her part in this game? And the man I am to marry? But she feared the answer. It's too hot to do more today, Shizuka said, taking the towel from Kaede and wiping her eyes. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to use the knife. As they stood, she added, Don't treat me any differently. I am just your servant, nothing more. I should apologize for the times I treated you badly, Kaede said awkwardly. You never did. Shizuka laughed. If anything, you are far too lenient. The Noguchi may have taught you nothing useful, but at least you did not learn cruelty from them. I learnt embroidery, Kaede said, but you can't kill anyone with a needle. You can, Shizuka said offhandedly. I'll show you one day. For a week, they waited in the mountain town for the Otori to arrive. The weather grew heavier and more sultry. Storm clouds gathered every night around the mountain peaks, and in the distance, lightning flickered. Yet it did not rain. Well, Kitty, if I recall correctly, that's coming up. Every day, Kaede learned to fight with the sword and the knife, starting at daybreak, before the worst of the heat, and training for 3 hours at a stretch, the sweat pouring off her face and body. Finally, one day at the end of the morning, as they were rinsing their faces with cold water, above the usual sounds of the streets came the tramp of horses, the barking of dogs. Shizuka beckoned Kaede to the window. Look, they are here. The Otori are here. Kaede peered through the lattice. The group of horsemen approached at a trot. Most of them wore helmets and armour, but on one side rode a bare-headed boy, not much older than herself. She saw the curve of his cheekbone, the silky gleam of his hair. "Is that Lord Shigeru?" "No," Shizuka laughed. "Lord Shigeru rides in front. The young man is his ward, Lord Takeo." She emphasized the word Lord in an ironic way that Kaede would recall later, but at the time she hardly noticed, for the boy, as if he had heard his name spoken, turned his head and looked towards her. He did. His eyes suggested depths of emotion. His mouth was sensitive, and she saw in his features both energy and sadness. It kindled something in her, a sort of curiosity mixed with longing, a feeling she did not recognize. The men rode on. When the boy disappeared from sight, she felt she had lost a part of herself. She followed Shizuka back to the inn like a sleepwalker. By the time they got there, she was trembling as if with fever. Shizuka, completely misunderstanding, tried to reassure her. "Lord Otori is a kind man, lady. You mustn't be afraid. No one will harm you." Kaede said nothing, not daring to open her mouth, for the only word she wanted to speak was his name. Takeo. She's got a crush. Shizuka tried to get her to eat. First soup to warm her, then cold noodles to cool her. But she could swallow nothing. Shizuka made her lie down. Kaede shivered beneath the quilt, her eyes bright, her skin dry, her body as unpredictable to her as a snake. Thunder crackled in the mountains, and the air swam with moisture. Smittenka, yeah. Alarmed, Shizuka sent for Lady Maruyama. When she came into the room, an old man followed her. "Uncle," Shizuka greeted him with a cry of delight. "What happened?" Lady Maruyama said, kneeling beside Kaede and placing her hand on her forehead. "She is burning. She must have taken a chill." "We were training," Shizuka explained. "We saw the Otori arrive, and she seemed to be struck by a sudden fever." "Can you give her something, Kenji?" Lady Maruyama asked. "She dreads the marriage," Shizuka said quietly. "I can cure a fever, but that I cannot cure," the old man said. "I'll have them brew some herbs. The tea will calm her." Kenji is Shizuka's uncle. "Hello, Asuka." "Ah, I'm here as requested." Yes, okay, Shizuka. Yes, Kenji is Shizuka's uncle. Therefore, it stands to reason that Shizuka is of the tribe. "Hello, I hope you're well, Asuka." Doesn't the name Shizuka mean to be quiet or something like that? Well enough? Oh, okay. Well, you get comfy then. Okay, so yes, I'll just reiterate. Just in the previous couple of pages, Keide saw the Otori arrive, Shigeru and Takeo, and yes, she took one look at Takeo and suddenly she's like,
Take a fucking sip, babes.
Thank you, Uncle
Julie,
Mary.
do the thing.
Hope you're doing well, Uncle Mary. So yes, she's feverish for Takeo. I'm alright, thank you. I don't usually stream on a Monday, but I was talked into it. Also, a couple of little additions to this. Pardon me. Additions to the stream. Little things here and there. Twisted that arm so hard. Hey, Salty, stream on Monday. Yeah, okay. Right. Interesting. Okay. Keide? Hello, Forrest. How you doing? Pedro. Pedro's the kind of guy you just want to give a big old hug to. How you doing, Forrest? Okay. Keide lay perfectly still with her eyes closed. She could hear them clearly, but they seemed to speak from another world. One that she had been plucked out of the moment. One that she had been plucked out of the moment her eyes met Takeo's. His personality goals? Indeed. Kitty, your corset came. Wonderful. Wonderful. Just woke up from naps. No worries, Forrest. You sit there and recover from nap. She roused herself to drink the tea, Shizuka holding her head as if she were a child, and then she drifted into a shallow sleep. She was woken by thunder rolling through the valley. The storm had finally broken, and rain was pelting down, ringing off the tiles and sluicing the cobbles. She had been dreaming vividly, but the moment she opened her eyes, the dream vanished, leaving her only with the lucid knowledge that what she felt was love. Must be nice to travel through the countryside at a leisurely pace. Haven't quite heard it described as the first one. I'll have to add the pet emote. Yes, what she felt was love. She was astonished, then elated, then dismayed. At first she thought she would die if she saw him, then that she would die if she didn't. She berated herself. How could she have fallen in love with the ward of the man she was to marry? And then she thought, what marriage? She could not marry Lord Otori. She would marry no one but Takeo. And then she found herself laughing at her own stupidity, as if anyone married for love. I've been overtaken by disaster, she thought at one moment, and the next, how can this feeling be a disaster? When Shizuka returned, she insisted that she had recovered. Indeed, the fever had abated, replaced by an intensity that made her eyes glow and her skin gleam. "You are more beautiful than ever," Shizuka exclaimed, as she bathed and dressed her, putting on the robes that had been prepared for her betrothal, for her first meeting with her future husband. Lady Maruyama greeted her with concern, asking after her health, and was relieved to find she was recovered. But Kaede was aware of the older woman's nervousness as she followed her to the best room in the inn, which had been prepared for Lord Otori. Girl got that afterglow. She could hear the men talking as the servants slid the doors open, but they fell silent at the sight of her. She bowed to the floor, conscious of their gaze, not daring to look at any of them. She could feel every pulse in her body as her heart began to race. "This is Lady Shirakawa Kaede," Lady Maruyama said. Her voice was cold, Kaede thought, and again wondered what she had done to offend the lady so much. "Lady Kaede, I present you to Lord Otori Shigeru," Lady Maruyama went on, her voice now so faint it could hardly be heard. Kaede sat up. "Lord Otori," she murmured, and raised her eyes to the face of the man she was to marry. "Lady Shirakawa," he replied with great politeness. "We heard you were unwell. You are recovered?" "Thank you, I'm quite well." She liked his face, seeing kindness in his gaze. He deserves his reputation, she thought. But how can I marry him? She felt colour rise in her cheeks. "Those herbs never fail," said the man sitting on his left. She recognized the voice of the old man who had had the tea made for her, the man Shizuka called uncle. "Lady Shirakawa has the reputation of a great beauty, but her reputation hardly does her justice." Lady Maruyama said, "You flatter her, Kenji. If a girl is not beautiful at 15, she never will be." 15. Kaede felt herself flush even more. "We have brought gifts for you," Lord Otori said. "They pale beside your beauty, but please accept them as a token of my deepest regard and the devotion of the Otori clan. Takeo." She thought he spoke the words with indifference, even coldness, and imagined he would always feel that way towards her. Yeah, Shigeru's like 30, by the way, or almost 30. The boy rose and brought forward a lacquered tray. On it were packages wrapped in pale pink silk crepe, bearing the crest of the Otori. Kneeling before Kaede, he presented it to her. She bowed in thanks. "This is Lord Otori's ward and adopted son," Lady Maruyama said. "Lord Otori Takeo." I too have needle skills. Any 30-year-old tries to court AV. Get him, kitty. Well, this is an arranged marriage, which it doesn't make it better, to be honest. Would it help if I told you this is an entirely fictional country? No, it doesn't. Yeah. Would it make it worse if I told you this is an arranged marriage? Lord Otori Takeo. She did not dare look at his face. She allowed herself instead to gaze on his hands. They were long-fingered, supple, and beautifully shaped. Since it's fictional, why write it like that? Good point, yeah. Could have gone either way. It's supposed to be set in a Japan of sorts, like a fictional Japan, but not Japan. In that sort of era accuracy. So yeah, it's not exactly accuracy, is it? But I can see the author's conundrum having to fit the vibe of that time with, the kind of ew factor. May I just say they're not married yet? in the book's defense, they're not married yet. It's thin, I know, but at least it's not 12 like the English. What was the book? Was it Shogun? Would 18 be so unreasonable, or even 20? Not really. I mean, they could have worked it in. The author could have worked it into the story somehow. Anyway, Takeo's hands are apparently exceptional. The skin was a colour between honey and tea. The nails tinged faintly lilac. She sensed the stillness within him, as if he were listening, always listening. Lord Takeo, she whispered. Exceptional. Ayo. A young lady is never so fine as when she's 25. Exactly. Although, I might disagree with that. He was not yet a man like the men she feared and hated. He was her age. His hair and skin had the same texture of youth. The intense curiosity she had felt before returned. Disagree? Yeah. Up. Let's go up. The intense curiosity she had felt before returned. She longed to know everything about him. Why had Lord Otori adopted him? Who was he really? What had happened to make him so sad? And why did she think he could hear her heart's thoughts? Lady Shirakawa. His voice was low, with a touch of the east in it. She had to look at him. She raised her eyes and met his gaze. He stared at her, almost puzzled, and she felt something leap between them, as though, somehow, they had touched across the space that separated them. The rain had eased a little earlier, but now it began again, with a drumming roar that all but drowned their voices. The wind rose too, making the lamp flames dance, and the shadows loom on the walls. May I stay here forever? Kaede thought. Hello, Bee. Lady Maruyama said sharply. has met you, but you have not been introduced. This is Muto Kenji, an old friend of Lord Otori and Lord Takeo's teacher. He will help Shizuka in your instruction. B. Sir, she acknowledged him, glancing at him from under her eyelashes. He was staring at her in outright admiration, shaking his head slightly as if in disbelief. He seems like a nice old man, Keide thought, and then, but he is not so old after all. His face seemed to slip and change in front of her eyes. She felt the floor beneath her move with the very slightest of tremors. No one spoke, but from outside someone shouted in surprise. Then there was only the wind and the rain again. A chill came over her. She must let none of her feelings show. Nothing was as it seemed. How are we doing? 1 hour, nearly. Boom. I know I pointed out before, but I hope everyone likes my little additions to the stream. I got little book there, and I got little PNG tuber, little sharky. I'm gonna edit the sharky and add like animation, and then I got like little MB heart in the corner. You did notice. Yeah, that PNG tuber was just a very quick little adjustment. Thank you, Askar. I did the book right before stream. I thought I can put a book there and make it look like the text is on the book cover or book spine. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7, I'm going to start reading. I just want to check how long it is. It's a long one, so I'm probably going to stop in the middle at some point. But why is chapter 7 so long? Oh, sorry, I cleared my throat into the mic then. Yeah, I want to, because you can use GIFs with it, so I thought I might make a little, because it's only 2 frames. 7 is always longer than it looks. Ayo. Ayo. I'm like tossing up between, do I say something or do I maintain this illusion of wholesomeness? My breadth makes me look shorter than I am. I am actually a tall. What? B? You're not tall. You go in pocket. You're small. Carry you around. PM Mila, not too wholesome. Must be a steak and tea, Tony. Yeah, exactly. Good. Okay. Okay. Chapter 7, we go back to Takeo's point of view. After my formal adoption into the clan, I began to see more of the young men of my own age from the warrior families. Ichiro was much sought after as a teacher, and since he was already instructing me in history, religion, and the classics, he agreed to take on other pupils as well. Among these was Miyoshi Gemba, who with his older brother, Kahei, was to become one of my closest allies and friends. Gemba was a year older than me. Kahei, I think that's how you pronounce it, was already in his 20s and too old for Ichiro's instruction, but he helped teach the younger men the arts of war. For these I now joined the men of the clan in the great hall opposite the castle, where we fought with poles and studied other martial arts. It's Kahei. Kahei. So yeah, EI on the end. On its sheltered southern side was a wide field for horsemanship and archery. I was no better with the bow than I'd ever been, but I could acquit myself well enough with the pole and the sword. Kahei. Every morning, after 2 hours riding practice with Ichiro, I would ride with a couple of the men through the winding streets of the castle town and spend 4 or 5 hours in relentless training. In the late afternoons, I returned to Ichiro with his other pupils, and we struggled to keep our eyes open while he tried to teach us the principles of Kung Su and the history of the 8 islands. Just again, this is not Japan, this is a country like Japan which is fictional. Fictional. The summer solstice passed, and the festival of the Weaver Star, and the days of the great heat began. The plum rains had ended, but it remained very humid, and heavy storms threatened. The farmers gloomily predicted a worse than usual typhoon season. My lessons with Kenji also continued, but at night. He stayed away from the clan hall and warned me against revealing my tribe skills. "The warriors think it's sorcery," he said. "They'll despise you for it." We went out on many nights, and I learned to move invisibly through the sleeping town. We had a strange relationship. I did not trust him at all in the daylight. I'd been adopted by the Otori, and I'd given my heart to them. I did not want to be reminded that I was an outsider, even a freak. But it was different at night. Kenji's skills were unparalleled. He wanted to share them with me, and I was mad with hunger to learn them, partly for their own sake, but because they fulfilled some dark need that was born into me, and partly because I knew how much I had to learn if I was ever to achieve what Lord Shigeru wanted me to do. Although he had not yet spoken of it to me, I could think of no other reason why he had rescued me from Mino. I was the son of an assassin, a member of the tribe, now his adopted son. I was going with him to Inuyama. What other purpose could there be but to kill Aida? Most of the boys accepted me, for Shigeru's sake, and I realized what a high regard they and their fathers had for him. But the sons of Masahiro and Shoichi gave me a hard time, especially Masahiro's oldest son, Yoshitomi. I grew to hate them as much as I hated their fathers, and I despised them too, for their arrogance and blindness. We often fought with the Poles. I knew their intentions towards me were murderous. Once Yoshitomi would have killed me if I had not, in an instant, used my second self to distract him. He never forgave me for it, and often whispered insults to me. Sorcerer. Cheat. I was actually less afraid of him killing me than of having to kill him in self-defense or by accident. No doubt it improved my swordsmanship, but I was relieved when the time for our departure came, and no blood had been shed. It was not a good time for travelling, being in the hottest days of summer. But we had to be in Inuyama before the Festival of the Dead began. We did not take the direct highway through Yamagata, but went south to Suwano, now the outpost town of the Otori fief, on the road to the west, where we would meet the bridal party and where the betrothal would take place. From there we would cross into Tohan territory and pick up the post road at Yamagata. Our journey to Suwano was uneventful and enjoyable despite the heat. I was away from Ichiro's teaching and from the pressures of training. It was like a holiday, riding in Shigeru and Kenji's company, and for a few days we all seemed to put aside our misgivings of what lay ahead. The rain held off, though lightning flickered around the ranges all night, turning the clouds indigo, and the full summer foliage of the forests surrounded us in a sea of green. Let's have a look. Boss tried to do the equality thing and put someone else on the tools for tonight. It'll be fine. Famous last words. We get 2 hours in and Boss realizes the raw skill difference between me and the rest of the team. I return to the tools now. Have a good stream. B, have good work. Yes, B is absolutely cracked. We rode into... Shall be gentle on it. Yeah, you don't want to impress everyone too much. We rode into Suwano at midday, having risen at sunrise for the last leg of the journey. I was sorry to arrive, knowing it meant the end of the innocent pleasures of our light-hearted travel. I could not have imagined what was going to take their place. Bossy nurse mode. Suwano sang of water, its streets lined with canals, teeming with fat, golden, and red carp. We were not far from the inn when suddenly, above the water and sounds of the bustling town, I clearly heard my own name spoken by a woman. The voice came from a long, low building with white walls and lattice windows, some kind of fighting hall. I knew there were 2 women inside, but I could not see them, and I wondered briefly why they were there, and why one of them should have said my name. When we came to the inn, I heard the same woman talking in the courtyard. I realized she was Lady Shirakawa's maid, and we learned the lady was unwell. Kenji went to her and came back wanting to describe her beauty at length, but the storm broke, and I was afraid the thunder would make the horses restive. So I hurried off to the stables without listening to him. I did not want to hear of her beauty. If I thought about her at all, it was with dislike for the part she was to play in the trap set for Shigeru. After a while, Kenji caught up with me in the stables and brought the maid with him. She looked like a pretty, good-natured, scatterbrained girl, but even before she grinned at me in a less than respectful way and addressed me as cousin, I'd picked her as a member of the tribe. She held her hands up against mine. I am also Kikuta on my mother's side, but Muto on my father's. Kenji is my uncle. Our hands had the same long-fingered shape and the same line straight across the palm. That's the only trait I inherited, she said ruefully. The rest of me is pure Muto. Like Kenji, she had the power to change her appearance, so that you were never sure you recognized her. At first I thought she was very young. In fact, she was almost 30 and had 2 sons. Lady Kaede is a little better. Oh, sorry, that's not Kenji. Lady Kaede is a little better, she told Kenji. Your tea made her sleep, and now she insists on getting up. Hello, Kid Monster, how you doing? Good to see you. You worked her too hard, Kenji said, grinning. What were you thinking of in this heat? To me, he added, Shizuka is teaching Lady Shirakawa the sword. She can teach you too. You'll be here for days in this rain. Maybe you can teach him ruthlessness, he said to her. It's all he lacks. It's hard to teach, Shizuka replied. You either have it or not. She has it, Kenji told me. Stay on her right side. I didn't reply. I was a little irritated that Kenji should point out my weakness to Shizuka as soon as we met her. We stood under the eaves of the stable yard, the rain drumming on the cobbles before us, the horses stamping behind. Are these fevers a common thing? Kenji asked. Not really. This is the first of its kind. But she is not strong. She hardly eats. She sleeps badly. She frets over the marriage and over her family. Her mother is dying, and she has not seen her since she was 7. You have become fond of her, Kenji said, smiling. Yes, I have, although I only came to her because Arai asked me to. I've never seen a more beautiful girl, Kenji admitted. Uncle, you are really smitten by her. I must be getting old, he said. I find myself moved by her plight. However things worked out, she will be the loser. A huge clap of thunder broke over our heads. The horses bucked and plunged on their lines. I ran to quieten them. Shizuka returned to the inn, and Kenji went in search of the bathhouse. I did not see them again until evening. Later, bathed and dressed in formal robes, I attended on Lord Shigeru for the first meeting with his future wife. We had brought gifts, and I unpacked them from the boxes, together with the lacquerware that we carried with us. A betrothal should be a happy occasion, I suppose, although I had never been to one before. Maybe for the bride it is always a time of apprehension. This one seemed to me to be fraught with tension and full of bad omens. Lady Maruyama greeted us as if we were no more than slight acquaintances, but her eyes hardly left Shigeru's face. I thought she had aged since I'd met her in Shigawa. She was no less beautiful, but suffering had etched her face with its fine lines. Both she and Shigeru seemed cold to each other and to everyone else, especially to Lady Shirakawa. Her beauty silenced us. Despite Kenji's enthusiasm earlier, I was quite unprepared for it. I thought then that I understood Lady Maruyama's suffering. At least part of it had to be jealousy. How could any man refuse the possession of such beauty? No one could blame Shigeru if he accepted it. He would be fulfilling his duty to his uncles and the demands of the alliance. But the marriage would deprive Lady Maruyama not only of the man she had loved for years, but her strongest ally. The undercurrents in the room made me uncomfortable and awkward. I saw the pain Lady Maruyama's coldness caused Kaede, saw the flush rise in her cheeks, making her skin lovelier than ever. I could hear her heartbeat and her rapid breath. She did not look at any of us, but kept her eyes cast down. I thought, she is so young and terrified. Then she raised her eyes and looked at me for a moment. I felt she was like a person drowning in the river, and if I reached out my hand, I would save her. So, Shigeru, you have to choose between the most powerful women. You have to choose between the most powerful woman in the three countries and the most beautiful, Kenji said later, while we were sitting up talking, and after many flasks of wine had been shared. Since the rain seemed likely to keep us in Suwano for some days, there was no need to go to bed early in order to rise before dawn. I should have been born a lord. You have a wife, if only you stayed with her, Shigeru replied. My wife is a good cook, but she has a wicked tongue. She's fat, and she hates travelling, Kenji grumbled. Dick. I said nothing but laughed to myself, already knowing how Kenji profited from his wife's absence in the pleasure quarter. Kenji continued to joke, with, I thought, some deeper purpose of sounding Shigeru out, but the Lord replied to him in the same vein, as if he truly were celebrating his betrothal. I went to sleep, fuddled by the wine, to the sound of rain pelting on the roof, cascading down the gutters and over the cobbles. The canals ran to the brim. In the distance I could hear the song of the river grow to a shout as it tumbled down the mountain. I woke in the middle of the night and was immediately aware that Shigeru was no longer in the room. When I listened, I could hear his voice talking to Lady Maruyama, so low that no one could hear it but me. I had heard them speak like that nearly a year before, in another inn room. I was both appalled at the risk they were taking and amazed at the strength of the love that sustained them through such infrequent meetings. He will never marry Shirakawa Kaede, I thought, but did not know if this realization delighted me or alarmed me. I was filled with unease and lay awake until dawn. It was a grey, wet dawn, too, with no sign of any break in the weather. A typhoon, earlier than usual, had swept across the western part of the country, bringing downpours, floods, broken bridges, impassable roads. Everything was damp and smelled of mould. 2 of the horses had hot, swollen hocks, and a groom had been kicked in the chest. I ordered poultices for the horses and arranged for an apothecary to see the man. I was eating a late breakfast when Kenji came to remind me about sword practice. It was the last thing I felt like doing. "What else do you plan to do all day?" he demanded. "Sit around and drink tea? Shizuka can teach you a lot. We might as well make the most of being stuck here." So I obediently finished eating and followed my teacher, running through the rain to the fighting school. I could hear the thump and clash of the sticks from outside. Inside, 2 young men were fighting. After a moment I realized one was not a boy, but Shizuka. She was more skillful than her opponent, but the other, taller and with greater determination, was making it quite a good match. At our appearance, though, Shizuka easily got beneath the guard. It wasn't until the other took off the mask that I realized it was Kaede. "Oh," she said angrily, wiping her face on her sleeve. "They distracted me." "Nothing must distract you, lady," Shizuka said. "It's your main weakness. You lack concentration. There must be nothing for you, your foe. There must be nothing but you, your foe, and the swords." She turned to greet us. "Good morning, uncle. Good morning, cousin." We returned the greeting and bowed more respectfully to Kaede. Then there was a short silence. I was feeling awkward. I had never seen women in a fighting hall before, never seen them dressed in practice clothes. Their presence unnerved me. I thought there was probably something unseemly about it. I should not be here with Shigeru's betrothed wife. "We should come back another time," I said, "when you have finished." "No, I want you to fight with Shizuka," Kenji said. "Lady Shirakawa can hardly return to the inn alone. It will profit her to watch." "It would be good for the lady to practice against a man," Shizuka said, "since, if it comes to battle, she will not be able to choose her opponents." I glanced at Kaede and saw her eyes widen slightly, but she said nothing. "Well, she should be able to beat Takeo," Kenji said sourly. I thought he must have a headache from the wine, and, indeed, I myself felt a little worse for wear. Kaede sat on the floor, cross-legged like a man. She untied the ties that held back her hair, and it fell around her, reaching the ground. I tried not to look at her. Shizuka gave me a pole and took up her first stance. I tried not to look at her. Shizuka gave me a pole and took up her first stance. We sparred a bit, neither of us giving anything away. I'd never fought with a woman before, and I was reluctant to go all out in case I hurt her. Then, to my surprise, when I feinted one way, she was already there, and a twisting upwards blow sent the pole out of my hands. If I'd been fighting Masahiro's son, I'd have been dead. "Cousin," she said reprovingly, "don't insult me, please." I tried harder after that, but she was skillful, and amazingly strong. It was only after the second bout that I began to get the upper hand, and then only after her instruction. She conceded the fourth bout, saying, "I have already fought all morning with Lady Kaede. You are fresh, cousin, as well as being half my age." "Little more than half, I think," I panted. Cheeky. Sweat was pouring off me. I took a towel from Kenji and wiped myself down. Kaede said, "Why do you call Lord Takeo cousin?" "Believe it or not, we are related on my mother's side," Shizuka said. "Lord Takeo was not born an Otori, but adopted." Kaede looked seriously at the three of us. "There is a likeness between you. It's hard to place exactly, but there is something mysterious, as though none of you is what you seem to be." She's astute. "The world being what it is, that is wisdom, lady," Kenji said, rather piously, I thought. I imagined he did not want Kaede to know the true nature of our relationship, that we were all from the tribe. I did not want her to know either. I much preferred her to think of me as one of the Otori. Shizuka took up the cords and tied back Kaede's hair. "Now you should try against Takeo." "No," I said immediately. "I should go now. I have to see the horses. I must see if Lord Otori needs me." Kaede stood. I was aware of her trembling slightly, and acutely aware of her scent, a flowery fragrance with her sweat beneath it. "Just one bout," Kenji said. "It can't do any harm." "Okay." Shizuka went to put on Kaede's mask, but she waved her away. "If I am to fight men, I must fight without a mask," she said. I took up the pole reluctantly. The rain was pouring down even more heavily. The room was dim, the light greenish. We seemed to be in a world within a world, isolated from the real one, bewitched. It started like an ordinary practice bout, both of us trying to unsettle the other, but I was afraid of hitting her face, and her eyes never left mine. We were both tentative, embarking on something utterly strange to us, whose rules we did not know. Then, at some point I was hardly aware of, the fight turned into a kind of dance. Step, strike, parry, step. Kaede's breath came more strongly, echoed by mine, until we were breathing in unison, and her eyes became brighter, and her face more glowing. Each blow became stronger, and the rhythm of our steps fiercer. For a while, I would dominate, then she, but neither of us could get the upper hand. Did either of us want to? Finally, almost by mistake, I got around her guard and, to avoid hitting her face, let the pole fall to the ground. Immediately, Kaede lowered her own pole and said, "I concede." "You did well," Shizuka said, "but I think Takeo could have tried a little harder." I stood and stared at Kaede, open-mouthed like an idiot. I thought, if I don't hold her in my arms now, I will die. Kenji handed me a towel and gave me a rough push in the chest. "Takeo," he started to say. "What?" I said stupidly. "Just don't complicate things." Shizuka said, as sharply as if she was warning of danger, "Lady Keide." "What?" Keide said, her eyes still fixed on my face. "I think we've done enough for one day," Shizuka said. "Let's return to your room." Keide smiled at me, suddenly unguarded. "Lord Takeo," she said. "Lady Shirakawa." I bowed to her, trying to be formal, but utterly unable to keep myself from smiling back at her. "Well, that's torn it," Kenji muttered. "What do you expect? It's their age," Shizuka replied. "They'll get over it." As Shizuka led Keide from the hall, calling to the servants who were waiting outside to bring umbrellas, it dawned on me what they were talking about. They were right in one thing and wrong in another. Keide and I had been scorched by desire for each other. More than desire, love. But we would never get over it. For a week, the torrents of rain kept us penned up in the mountain town. Keide and I did not train together again. I wished we had never done so. It had been a moment of madness. I had never wanted it, and now I was tormented by the results. I listened for her all day long. I could hear her voice, her step, and, at night, when only a thin wall separated us, her breathing. I could tell how she slept, restlessly, and when she woke, often. We spent time together. We were forced to by the smallness of the inn, by being in the same travelling party, by being expected to be with Lord Shigeru and Lady Maruyama, but we had no opportunity to speak to each other. We were both, I think, equally terrified of giving our feelings away. We hardly dared to look at each other, but occasionally our eyes would meet, and the fire leapt between us again. I went lean and hollow-eyed with desire, made worse by lack of sleep, for I reverted to my old haggy ways and went exploring at night. Shigeru did not know, for I left while he was with Lady Maruyama, and Kenji either did not or pretended not to notice. I felt I was becoming as insubstantial as a ghost. By day I studied and drew. By night I went in search of other people's lives, moving through the small town like a shadow. Often the thought came to me that I would never have a life of my own, but would always belong to the Otori or to the tribe. I watched merchants calculating the loss the water damage would bring them. I watched the townspeople drink and gamble in bars and let prostitutes lead them away by the arm. I watched parents sleep, their children between them. I climbed walls and drain pipes, walked over roofs and along fences. Once I swam the moat, climbed the castle walls and gate, and watched the guards, so close I could smell them. It amazed me that they did not see or hear me. I listened to people talking, awake and in their sleep, heard their protestations, their curses, and their prayers. I went back to the inn before dawn drenched to the skin, took off my wet clothes, and slipped naked and shivering beneath the quilts. I dozed and listened to the place waking around me. First the cocks crowed, then the crows began cawing. Tell me about it. Servants woke and fetched water. Clogs clattered over the wooden bridges. Raku and the other horses whinnied from the stables. I waited for the moment when I would hear Kade's voice. The rain poured down for 3 days and then began to lessen. Many people came to the inn to speak to Shigeru. I listened to the careful conversations and tried to discern who was loyal to him and who would be only too eager to join in his betrayal. We went to the castle to present gifts to Lord Kitano, and I saw in daylight the walls and gate I had climbed at night. He greeted us with courtesy and expressed his sympathy for Takeshi's death. It seemed to be on his conscience, for he returned to the subject more than once. He was of an age with the Otori lords, and had sons the same age as Shigeru. They did not attend the meeting. One was said to be away, the other unwell. He expressed apologies, which I knew were lies. They lived in Hagi when they were boys, Shigeru told me later. We trained and studied together. They came many times to my parents' house, and were as close as brothers to Takeshi and myself. He was silent for a moment, then went on. Well, that was many years ago. Times change, and we must all change with them. But I could not be so resigned. I felt bitterly that the closer we came to Tohan territory, the more isolated he was becoming. It was early evening. We had bathed and were waiting for the meal. Kenji had gone to the public bathhouse, where a girl had taken his fancy, he said. The room gave onto a small garden. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, and the doors were wide open. There was a strong smell of sodden earth and wet leaves. It will clear tomorrow, Shigeru said. We will be able to ride on, but we will not get to Inuyama before the festival. We will be forced to stay in Yamagata, I think. He smiled entirely mirthlessly and said, I shall be able to commemorate my brother's death in the place where he died. But I cannot let anyone know my feelings. I must pretend to have put aside all thought of revenge. Why go into Tohan territory? I asked. It's not too late to turn back. If it's my adoption that binds you to the marriage, I could go away with Kenji. It's what he wants. Certainly not, he replied. I've given my word to these arrangements, and set my seal on them. I have plunged into the river now, and must go where the current takes me. I would sooner Aida killed me than despised me. He looked around the room, listening. Are we completely alone? Can you hear anyone? I could hear the usual evening sounds of the inn, the soft tread of maids as they carried food and water. From the kitchen, the sound of the cook's knife chopping. Water boiling, the muttered conversation of the guards in the passageway and the courtyard. I could hear no other breath but our own. We are alone. Come closer. Once we are among the Tohan, we will have no chance to talk. There are many things I need to tell you before... He grinned at me, a real smile this time. Before whatever happens in Inuyama. Bump the mic. I've thought about sending you away. Kenji desires it for your safety, and of course his fears are justified. I must go to Inuyama, come what may. However, I am asking an almost impossible service from you, far beyond any obligation you may have to me, and I feel I must give you a choice. Before we ride into Tohan territory, after you have heard what I have to say, if you wish to leave with Kenji and join the tribe, you are free to do so. I was saved from answering by a faint sound from the passageway. Someone is coming to the door. We were both silent. A few moments later, the maids entered with trays of food. When they had left again, we began to eat. The food was sparse because of the rain. Some sort of soused fish, rice, devil's tongue, and pickled cucumbers. But I don't think either of us tasted it. You may wonder what my hatred of Aida is based on, Shigeru said. I have always had a personal dislike for him, for his cruelty and double-dealing. After Yagahara and my father's death, when my uncles took over the leadership of the clan, many people thought I should have taken my own life. That would have been the honourable thing to do, and, for them, a convenient solution to my irritating presence. But as the Tohan moved into what had been Otori land, and I saw the devastating effect of their rule on the common people, I decided a more worthwhile response would be to live and seek revenge. I believe the test of government is the contentment of the people. If the ruler is just, the land receives the blessings of heaven. In Tohan lands, the people are starving, debt-ridden, harassed all the time by Aida's officials. The hidden are tortured and murdered, crucified, suspended upside down over pits of waste, hung in baskets for the crows to feed on. Farmers have to expose their newborn children and sell their daughters because they have nothing to feed them with. He took a piece of fish and ate it fastidiously, his face impassive. Aida became the most powerful ruler in the 3 countries. Power brings its own legitimacy. Most people believe any lord has the right to do as he pleases in his own clan and his own country. It's what I, too, was brought up to believe in. But he threatened my land, my father's land, and I was not going to see it handed over to him without a fight. Yes, Forrest, awesome. I made pizza the other day. It's good. Good stuff. This has been in my mind for many years. I took on a personality for myself that is only partly my own. They called me Shigeru the farmer. I devoted myself to improving my land and talked of nothing but the seasons, crops, and irrigation. These matters interest me anyway, but they also gave me the excuse to travel widely through the fief and learn many things I would not otherwise have known. I avoided Tohan lands apart from yearly visits to Teriyama, where my father and many of my ancestors are buried. The temple was ceded to the Tohan along with the city of Yamagata after Yagihara. But then the Tohan cruelty touched me personally, and my patience began to wear thin. Last year, just after the festival of the Weaver Star, my mother fell ill with a fever. It was particularly virulent. She was dead within a week. 3 other members of the household died, including her maid. I also became sick. For 4 weeks I hovered between life and death, delirious, knowing nothing. I was not expected to recover, and when I did, I wished I had died, for it was then that I learned my brother had been killed in the first week of my illness. It was high summer. He was already buried. No one could tell me what had happened. There seemed to be no witnesses. He had recently taken a new lover, but the girl had disappeared too. We heard only that a Suwano merchant had recognized his body in the streets of Yamagata and had arranged burial at Teriyama. In desperation, I wrote to Muto Kenji, whom I had known since Yagihara, thinking the tribe might have some information. 2 weeks later, a man came to my house late at night, bearing a letter of introduction with Kenji's seal. I would have taken him for a groom or a foot soldier. He confided in me that his name was Kuroda, which I knew can be a tribe name. The girl Takeshi had fallen for was a singer, and they had gone together to Suwano for the Star Festival. That much I already knew, for as soon as my mother fell sick, I'd sent word to him not to return to Hagi. I'd meant for him to stay in Suwano, but it seems the girl wished to go on to Yamagata, where she had relatives, and Takeshi went with her. Kuroda told me that there were comments made in an inn, insults to the Otori, to myself. A fight broke out. Takeshi was an excellent swordsman. He killed 2 men and wounded several others who ran away. He went back to the girl's relative's house. Tohan men returned in the middle of the night and set fire to the house. Everyone in it burned to death or was stabbed as they tried to escape the flames. I closed my eyes briefly, thinking I could hear their screams. Yes, it was like Mino, Shigeru said bitterly. The Tohan claimed the family were hidden, though it seems almost certain they were not. My brother was in travelling clothes. No one knew his identity. His body lay in the street for 2 days. He sighed deeply. There should have been outrage. Clans have gone to war over less. At the very least, Aida should have apologized, punished his men and made some restitution. But Kuroda reported to me that when Aida heard the news, his words were, "One less of those Otori upstarts to worry about. Too bad it wasn't the brother." Even the men who committed the act were astonished, Kuroda said. They had not known who Takeshi was. When they found out, they expected their lives to be forfeit. But Aida did nothing, nor did my uncles. I told them in private what Kuroda had told me. They chose not to believe me. They reminded me of the rashness of Takeshi's behavior in the past, the fights he had been involved in, the risks he took. They forbade me from speaking publicly about the matter, reminding me that I was still far from well and suggesting I should go away for a while, make a trip to the eastern mountains, try the hot springs, pray at the shrines. I decided I would go away, but not for the purposes they suggested. "You came to find me in Mino," I whispered. He did not answer me at once. It was dark outside now, but there was a faint glow from the sky. The clouds were breaking up, and between them the moon appeared and disappeared. For the first time I could make out the outline of the mountains and the pine trees, black against the night sky. "Tell the servants to bring lights," Shigeru said, and I went to the door to call the maids. They came and removed the trays, brought tea, and lit the lamps in the stands. When they had left once more, we drank the tea in silence. The bowls were a dark blue glaze. Shigeru turned his in his hand, and then upended it to read the potter's name. "It's not as pleasing to my mind as the earth colours of Hagi," he said, "but beautiful nonetheless." "May I ask you a question?" I said, and then fell silent again, not sure if I wanted to know the answer. "Go on," he prompted. "You have allowed people to believe we met by accident, but I felt you knew where to find me. You were looking for me." He nodded. "Yes, I knew who you were as soon as I saw you on the path. I had come to Mino with the express purpose of finding you. Because my father was an assassin. That was the main reason, but not the only one. I felt as if there were not enough air in the room for me to draw the breath I needed. I did not bother with whatever other reasons Lord Shigeru might have had. I needed to concentrate on the main one." "But how did you know, when I myself did not know? When the tribe did not know?" He said, his voice lower than ever. "Pardon me. Since Yagahara, I've had time to learn many things. I was just a boy then, a typical warrior's son with no ideas beyond the sword and my family's honour. I met Muto Kenji there, and in the months afterwards he opened my eyes to the power that lay beneath the warrior class's rule. I discovered something about the networks of the tribe, and I saw how they controlled the warlords and the clans. Kenji became a friend, and through him I met many other tribe members. They interested me. I probably know more about them than any other outsider. But I've kept this knowledge to myself, never telling anyone else. Ichiro knows a little, and now you do too." I thought of the heron's beak plunging down into the water. Kenji was wrong the first night he came to Hagi. I knew very well who I was bringing into my household. I had not realized, though, that your talents would be so great. He smiled at me, the open-hearted smile that transformed his face. That was an unexpected reward. Now I seemed to have lost the power of speech again. I knew we had to broach the subject of Shigeru's purpose in seeking me out and saving my life, but I could not bring myself to speak so boldly of such things. I felt the darkness of my tribe nature rise within me. I said nothing and waited. Shigeru said, "I knew I would have no rest under heaven while my brother's murderers lived. I held their lord responsible for their actions, and in the meantime circumstances have changed. A rise falling out with the Noguchi meant the Seishu were again interested in an alliance with the Otori against Aida. everything seemed to point to one conclusion: that the time had come to assassinate him. Dun dun dun. I'm going to leave it there, chat. It is in the middle of a chapter, but tomorrow, at the same time as now, except 2 hours earlier, I will continue reading Across the Nightingale Floor.
A little bit spicy. Spicy.
Thank you, Forrest. A little bit spicy. I like that emote. The BTTV emote. If I can select the damn thing. Come here. Where is it? Ew, light mode. That one. I was in the kitchen. Dun dun dun. Okay. The last it was the time had come to assassinate him. So yes, they're it's nice. It is nice. It's very nice. And I got a nice little message from a friendo who made it too. And I was like, that's so nice. I think that's like 2 people I've met through, or sort of met through BTTV. I've like used their emotes, and I've also like someone has used my emote in BTTV, and I've like joined their stream, and I'm like, oh, this stream is nice. So you never know when you interact with certain people and certain things that people have made, how you can sort of make little connections. I'm not saying we're like besties, I'm just saying like we've, spoken, exchanged words. Yeah, it's quite nice. So, stream is successful. Yes. Another way to find new friends? Yeah, exactly. And it's good because if someone likes that emote, clearly they are probably a quality person. Networking the nice way? Yeah. Tomorrow 8 p.m, 9 p.m. 9 p.m, Tuesday and Wednesday nights. So, yes. 2 hours earlier than now, because it is 11 p.m. now. Because daylight savings should be over for you, shouldn't it? I thought daylight savings was done. Queensland time. I was quite confident that daylight savings was over. But then again, I thought Mother's Day was last weekend. It's next weekend. I thought Mother's Day was the first Sunday in May, but saw the 22 and thought it was 8 p.m. No. Current time is 11 p.m. Queensland time. I also have a thing on my About page which should hopefully give you an idea of when the stream is your time. And hopefully it's not balked. But anyway, 22 hours from now. How about that? 9 p.m. It's 9 p.m. I always start stream at 9 p.m. Alright, we're rating Ari. Oh, random shout out. I'm going to shout out someone who was having a bit of a rough time on the weekend. She's an ASMR streamer, so you might like her, you might not. She does more traditional ASMR. Very sweet, very comfy, cozy. Why am I opening Proton Mail? Twitch, okay. Wrong. Okay. Where's my videos so I can remember what her username is? I can't remember what her username is. Somebody tell me. I've followed too many people. Don't you hate it when you're like going through videos and someone's stream has started and stopped, and it's like their videos have just like spammed your videos feed? It's just like, her name is Pixel Kohai. Okay, shouting at Pixel Kohai. I popped into her stream the other day.
Glory to you and your house.
Poor Petal. She was streaming and wondering why no one was watching her. She had like 6 people. I'm just like, I said in chat, you deserve way more viewers. And then someone else, like half an hour later, said, you're not in the ASMR category. She wasn't in a category. And I'm like, I didn't even realize you could stream without a category. You don't need a category to stream, chat. So if you want to tank your searchability for some reason, just remove your category. Here for the Ari, stay for the lewd. What is that sip? Okay. Okay, we're raiding Ari. Here's the raid commands. You can make your own raid command if you want. I don't mind. As long as it involves something salty. Okay. / raid Ariella. We're going to raid Ari before I space out. You tried? Oh no. You can, that's okay, Asko, you can raid with that one. Alright. Yes, I'm kind of been reading for 2 hours, so I'm kind of like fuzzing out a bit. Love a little salty? No. Thanks for stream. No worries, Aska. Everyone, go say hi to my friend Ari. She has a little bit of music when she enters, but it's not too loud, hopefully. But it is a little bit louder than my stream. Alrighty, everyone. I will see you tomorrow night, 22 hours from now. Alrighty, friends. Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye-bye.